To Leadership Academy 2022 and 2021. We're here with Tricia Gosser, and Tricia's got a big fancy title now. She's Senior Vice President of Finance and something, Finance General and Admin in our finance team. That's what it says in the HR system, anyway. Tricia, what is the official title here?
Yep, it does not include general and admin, hopefully. Yeah, I am SVP of Finance, which is our financial planning and analysis team, and investor relations.
Yeah, got it. So, ooh, right. Yeah. So you're like an official person that talks to the SEC, and you're that's a heavy burden. Well, good. So we're talking to the right person, and Tricia and I have known each other for a while. She came up through our local organization. And that makes her extra qualified, I think, to talk to this group about our topic. In general, we're trying to help you understand kind of how our financial orientation works and how that relates to how you as news leaders can understand that, can contribute to it, can use it as a tool to get done what you want to get done. Tricia, tell us about your local background with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with Gannett and what was Legacy Gannett for quite a while. I think I've been with the company for 15 years now, and I started in our Phoenix property as a junior financial analyst right when I missed the heyday of when the media industry was booming and newspapers were thriving, and we were hiring left and right. In fact, a very quick story is I was hired and then unhired because there was a hiring freeze, and then rehired. And so I've only known the media industry through transformation and from, grit and resiliency. And so I started in Phoenix. I spent a few years there, spent a few years when we used to have regions as part of the West region. So all the properties that rolled up into the West region. I've been in Tyson's for 6 years now, either through the media side of the business, or then all of operations, or then now part of the corporate structure as well. But I think one of the things I love most is that I did get to spend a decade in a local property. Back when we were structured very, very differently. We had publishers, and we operated site by site, and can see benefits of both operating models. But then got a lot of exposure to how all the different areas of the businesses operated, and had great partnerships, whether it was with Nicole was in Phoenix at the time, Randy Lovely was at the time with me. So a lot of great leaders that I was exposed to on the content side of the organization as well.
Great. All right. So, I think coming up on the local side is not just credibility instantly to a group like this, but also it just you see it the way a lot of these folks see it. So tell us a little bit about how what are some of the changes in how our financial planning has changed, where local units used to do things one way, and maybe that's changed over the last couple of years. So things that they no longer have to worry about, or maybe things that are out of their control. What would you say are some of the changes that local journalist leaders will have seen over these last few years?
Yeah, I can certainly weigh in from my perspective, but I would love to hear what folks are seeing and experienced, or have questions as well. And I hope our goal is to make this super conversational. So please interrupt me if you have questions or want me to clarify. There's certainly been an evolution of how we manage our business over the last several years, whether it's creating functional leadership to bringing two different organizations together through the integration and the acquisition. And I can very much see that, one half of the organization was in heavy acquisition mode, buying properties, and really letting most of those properties operate on their own as, we were building scale. And over the last couple of years, since we've had scale, since we've become one organization, we've been really focused on integration versus acquisition. And so it means things like common systems that allows us to leverage data across the organization, common decision makers or common processes. And there's benefits and trade-offs to that, right? You know, all being on the same system, all trying to do things the same way does allow us to have better data, does allow us to hopefully navigate trade-offs better. But it does probably feel like, you know, we're losing some of the personalization of serving our local markets. But it has allowed us to take out corporate overhead, for example. It allows us to get efficiencies in back office, whether it's, you know, our teams or meaning my team or local accounting. So we've really tried to get standardization, common systems, and really all pulling towards the same goal, right? We know we have North Stars now and really pulling towards those North Star priorities. I think that that's been one of the biggest shifts, is really pulling towards the same direction on the same systems with the same goal in mind.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's what that.
No, that's good. Yeah, in the middle of my screen, I'm looking at a guy that I don't know if you've ever met, Doug Gass. He and I were young pups in Rockford, Illinois together, and I remember there was a guy with a very ominous title there called the Controller, and the Controller is the local finance person. And you know, back in those days, a local unit operated like its own little fiefdom, kind of. It had, you know, whoops, something went wrong. I'm going to turn off my camera. I think my internet's sucking right now. But yeah, like, I don't know if you heard the comment about the little fiefdom. Did you hear that?
We did. I did. But now you're muted and we're not hearing anything.
Yeah, sorry. I'm doing everything I can to make it work. You hear me okay right now?
We do.
Right. So I don't know how much you heard of that, Tricia.
We heard your fiefdoms.
Yeah, right. And so now it's like, you know, we have a lot of centralized services and things like that. So what are the financial decisions that local journalism leaders control?
Yeah, so now I would say for the most part, we manage, at least on the content side of the organization, very regionally, right? So we have regional editors. I was actually just talking to Kevin Huff on my team, who is the finance partner for the content organization, right before this call. And we really manage our P&Ls. Sorry, I'm laughing at the chat. We really manage our P&Ls on a regional basis. And so we don't do site level P&Ls anymore. We still do site level P&Ls. We don't manage to the site level because managing regionally really allows us to make better trade-offs, right? And so we may say, you know, it makes more sense to have somebody in Milwaukee versus Stevens Point or vice versa. And managing regionally allows us to do those to make the best choices for the region. And so I would say most expenses, if we're talking about expenses, are managed on a regional basis. That being said, along with expenses is the goal of all of our KPIs and what's driving the top line and what's driving our performance. And those are all very site specific, right? And so it's balancing that, knowing that I, as a journalist, have certain goals for story conversion, for example, or that my site has certain goals for digital subscription conversion, but that we manage our resources on this regional level.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now let's talk. You mentioned something that our journalists have direct influence over: digital subscriptions. It's sort of like we're in a new position or newish position as journalists of having such a clear link to the sustainability of our business. And that's not always been the case when a larger share of our revenue came from, you know, advertising and so on and so forth. So the business savvy top editor, which is the track that people on this call are headed towards, needs to think about what kinds of things in order to deliver those best financial results.
Yeah, I'll share it from my perspective and from a financial perspective. And one of the things I really have seen an evolution of, and I really love, is how much our content side of the organization has linked arms with the rest of the organization in achieving business goals. while always doing it at an arm's length, right? We understand the importance of that arm's length and the influence and making the right decisions as a journalist and never compromising that. But I've also loved how much our editors and our journalists and our content creators and everybody has been interested in how do I drive the business forward, because that's what funds what we do, right? And so how can we drive more revenue, more profit? It's been such a great evolution to see that partnership evolve over the last couple of years. To me, the number one priority is serving our readers with what they want and what they need, right? Not just what they want, not just sugar and candy, but their vegetables too. And what is going to keep them engaged. And, we all have, I think, our goals, whether it is conversion, engagement, and not just digital. It's hard. It's our top priority, but it's hard not to say that print's not still important. We really love our print readers. They still bring us $1 billion of revenue every year. It's a significant piece of our business. And we want to make sure our print readers know that we love them and value them. But it is, what are my KPIs? How am I tracking towards that, and being, laser focused on those KPIs that we've set out there, whether it's conversion goals for stories or whatever it is.
Very good. And it looks like Alex has got, she likes your comment there about sugar and candy, but vegetables too, might be using that. What are some of the, and I would invite anyone who's got questions for Tricia here to get those queued up, and would love to hear from you. You don't want to just hear me interviewing Tricia all day. All right, well, here's Michael with he wants to know, well, you can read it. He wants to see the balance there. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're right now hovering just over a third of our revenue is digital revenue. Now that's company wide, right? So that includes our digital marketing services solutions revenue, digital media, digital circulation, as well as our syndication of our content. I think not everybody realizes that the syndication of our content on places like Yahoo or MSN also counts towards our digital revenue. So we're about a third digital right now. We held CFO office hours earlier today, which maybe sounds like the most boring thing in the world, but it's genuinely not. It's a great conversation. And I think it's an opportunity for folks to ask any sort of business questions. So encourage folks, if you're interested, to attend those when Doug sends out the invite. But one of the slides was about our digital journey in Q1 2020. I think we were mid to high 20% digital revenue. And now we're a little bit over, a third. Our goal is to be 2/3 digital, 25, 26 timeframe. And the key to that is not just not losing revenue and having digital become a bigger percentage, but in the next couple of years, actually growing revenue and growing digital revenue at the same time. And that's going to be the key to success. So long answer, short answer is 33.5%.
Very good. I'll follow up on Michael's question there. So, let's do some math here, since we have an expert in mathematics here. Every digital subscription is worth a certain amount of money to us, right? If I'll make up a number, $100 a year, probably. Like if the average rate is $8 a month, and 12 months, that comes in at around $96. Okay, now that might be plus or minus a few bucks, but we need a lot more of those to fund. Just think what a job costs, and a job costs whatever it costs plus 20% for benefits and so on and so forth. Divide $100 or $96 into that. That's how many subscribers we need to pay for one job. So Tricia, we hear Mike talking about big numbers, millions and millions of digital subscriptions. Put that in context for us. To sustain the business that costs what it costs today, as the print share of the pie is shrinking, what do we need to do from a digital subscription standpoint to stay at this size or bigger?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. We think print is an important part of our business. We do 5-year models on a rolling basis. And so we always are looking 5 years out. And the farther out you go, the more that changes every year you do it, and the more gray it is. But we're always looking 5 years out. We still think print is important to us in 5 years, but absolutely what we also do is say, what if we were only a digital business? And what does that look like? And how does a digital only circulation business, how would you fund that? And what does the size of that organization look like? Because at some point, not 2025 and not 2026, but that will be the future of our industry eventually, right? And that eventually is hotly up for debate. I bet everybody on this call has a different opinion, which is equally valid of when that is. But you're absolutely right. It is, how does a digital only subscription business fund the newsroom? Is really how we should think about things long term.
And if we were a digital only business, and we could do the math like we just talked about right there, but almost at any size, we would be the best funded startup ever, right? Because we have all of the value of our local brands that in many cases goes back 100 or sometimes 200 or more years. We have all of the relationships with the many subscribers that go back themselves many years. And there are we could calculate values to all of these things as well. We, in some cases, still own our building free and clear. In a lot of cases, we're selling that to raise cash, but there's no startup in town that can sell real estate to raise cash. So there's a lot of things that we have at our back, however difficult it may seem. So compare a future scenario like what you talked about, almost digital exclusive business, to what a startup would have to go through, and what advantages and disadvantages we would have.
Yeah, I'll start with the disadvantages and with the advantages. And I think one of the disadvantages is startups have the ability to lose money, right? Startups can enter in, have backers, have folks who are throwing cash at them and can operate at a loss for some period of time. I will say that with the latest volatility in the market, when when mortgage rates are rising, that type of environment, when future performance is a little bit cloudier. So, right now, I'd say within the last month even, there's less tolerance for companies that don't make money. But for the last year, while for the most part, the American consumer was very strong, the stock market was performing really well, companies that didn't make money were the darlings of hedge funds and investors, and you could lose money. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we need you to make money. It's hard to get cash in raising rates. And if you're not making money, it's hard to get more cash. So I would say, a disadvantage or an advantage that startups have is that freedom to lose money, to find their way. And we don't have that, right? We're an established company. People already have expectations of us. We're already public. We already have debt. We have a number of obligations. And so we have to pay our debt. We have to be mindful of our stock price, because a low stock price invites, activist investors, those type of things. The advantage is that I have found, whether it's in the content side of the business or in the digital marketing solution side of the business, getting to scale is the biggest hurdle that folks have. You can start up, you can have 40 folks, but how do you get to 400 folks? How do you get to 4,000 folks? And we're already there. We already have scale. We're already in the markets that we want to be in. We've already got, 190 million people that come see us every month. We've got an audience. We've got the journalists. We've got the local sales reps. We're at scale. That's the hardest thing for people to get to from a startup perspective to success. And so we're at scale. And so it's balancing those two. It's balancing the expectations of already being a public company and everything that comes with it with, hey, we've already got scale and now it's all about execution.
Thank you for that answer. The reason I asked you that question, Tricia, the folks that are on this call are going to be called upon to answer questions like that from their teams when they're in leadership, high leadership positions. For example, I mean, I was guilty of it myself when I told you that story from 100 years ago from Rockford, Illinois, about how we, like the good old days loom large. And, the comparison really isn't between today and yesteryear. It's between today and those who are competing with us in the same space. So today in 2022 and going forward, we're competing with Axios Local, right? That's a local, that's a startup that can lose money for the time being, at least until investors wake up and want their money back, and they are awake, as you just documented, right? So you're, as leaders, we have to be able to field questions ably, that when people are coming at us and saying, I wish it, I want it to be like it used to be, and that's sort of, emotionally we understand, but it's sort of an irrelevant question. What the question is more sort of productively posed as, what's our best position we can be in today? And so I was workshopping that for you so folks could hear your answer. To that end, let me ask, who else has questions for Tricia, especially because you face questions, either you have them yourself or you face them from your teams, and they're tough questions. People want to know when it's hard to get a raise, it's hard to fill a job, et cetera, et cetera. So Eric from California, go ahead and speak up with your question, Eric.
So I was just curious, I've been in this role for a while, and we used to get budgets like, hey, here's how much you can spend monthly on freelancers.
Mm-hmm.
At some point that stopped. But we still get those questions on like, hey, can we send a freelancer to go do this or do that? Just kind of curious if that might ever come back, or is that something that we like asked for now and I just didn't know it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the lowest that I believe the content side of the organization does budgets is regionally. And so each regional editor has a budget that they are responsible for managing across the region, to have some flexibility and make sure that we're making the best decisions for the entire region, which I think allows you to make better holistic decisions. So each site doesn't have a budget anymore. We probably won't get back to the point where each site has a budget. So it's really coordinating with your regional leader, which probably, I'm going to admit, feels a little bit cumbersome. But that's the level that we're managing at. The other thing that I think is really important to note is that we walk into the year. So that's the answer to that question, but I'm going to take it one step further. We walk into the year with a budget, and really we start budgeting early, but heavy work is September, October. And then by the time you get to January, things have changed a little bit. By the time you get to April, things have changed a little bit. And so we always have our budget. Our budgets are always in place and held static, but we're always going to have to pivot throughout the year. Something's always going to go better or worse than we expect it to. And, we firmly believe that at Gannett we succeed or fail as an organization. And so we're often pivoting off of those budgets to make sure that we're hitting our overall target, depending on what's happening out there. And so 2 points to that is manage regionally, make sure we're coordinating with regional editors on what's available, how are they managing their budgets, and then just know that, what's the budget on January 1st may not be the operating principle on July 1st. It's always pivoting as new things come up.
That's good. Your answer, thanks for the question, Eric. Your answer reminded me of something our former CEO, your former boss, Bob Dickey, told me. He said, we don't work for the budget works for us. And
I love that.
Yeah. And it was like he was saying a couple of things. One was, if the reality changes, bad or good, your plan can change. And second was something that he said when, you'd come to him with a proposal. Hey, we have this opportunity. We want to invest over here or make this hire in order to do this thing, which is going to get us good results. And he'd be like, yeah, that's a great idea. That sounds good. What would you like to subtract in order to pay for it? It's not, there's no like money laying around that I hadn't told you about. And so it just, every decision is made in the context of all the other decisions, and so suddenly the 6% profit margin on that decision became a lot more tenuous when you had to defund something else in order to do it. So, but on the other hand, if we really want to do that other thing, let's go. Let's make the hard decision to subtract somewhere else and do this because it is that important. So it was both a dire warning and a like very empowering, you know, if it's truly more worth it than its alternative, let's do it. We don't care if the budget said, let's do A if we like B better.
Mm-hmm.
So thoughts on that, and then we'll get back to the chat.
Yeah, and I've been some great questions in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. And I do think one of the things we're trying to be better at as an organization, and I think we have a long way to go, is to be more transparent about what's not working, right? And so, and to be okay with it and say, oh gosh, this isn't working, let's change course. Not to change course all the time, right? But to say what's working and where we might go instead. And I just think that's really a healthy culture for us to have. And you know, so I think you're exactly right. There's a limited pool of dollars, right? There's a finite pool of dollars, and how do we best allocate those? And what trade-offs do you make? Our business is all about trade-offs. And so what trade-offs do you make? And, you know, going down a path and saying, you know what, actually, I think we should do this, and making that trade-off is going to be so important for us.
All right, now let's pause on Jackie's point because I want to. That's going to take some unpacking. Eric has kind of an operational question that's probably a lot of folks are facing. Eric, go ahead again, please.
I just feel bad because I'm like coding things wrong all the time, and like I'll bill just about everyone on this call probably for, you know, if I sell you office supplies. So I just was wondering if there's a one-on-one class, is there like a cheat sheet somewhere?
Yeah, I'm sure that there is. So two things. First, I want to acknowledge, I think the company went through an overhaul in our AP earlier this year. Maybe it was last year when we converted systems, and it was a pain. It was just a pain. It was a pain across the entire organization. It was the right choice to make from a system perspective, but there were some bumps along the way. And so A, appreciate everybody's patience as we went through that. And B, yes, you know, I've worked here for 15 years. I used to know all of the codes. I don't know a single code anymore. I couldn't tell you one code. So I'm right there with you. I'm sure that there is a cheat sheet, whether we can get our partners in accounting to put something together, or a class, or maybe someone on Kevin's team. It's a great suggestion. In fact, I know Kevin Huff was just saying he's working with the AP team to say, it doesn't even tell you the name of it. It's just a bunch of numbers. You know, can we at least put like the names in it so people can tell where they're coding it? So lots of room for improvement. Great suggestion. I'll bring up the kind of 101 for this group or whatever group you think it's appropriate for, to make that easier, because that's the last thing we want folks to be thinking about.
Well, asking you shall receive. Kevin Hogan in New York has the cheat sheet. So there you go.
Great.
And
I love it.
And Eric, now you have no excuse for billing me for those 4 staplers you bought last month. Okay,
it's
so
not, I will say it's not as easy as it looks. You still have to find out which one of the coding for freelancers, because there's multiple ones. So it took me some time to look at historical invoices and coding to find all that out, but I was able to get all or most of my information there, because I have that trouble too, still with my cheat sheet.
Oh, very, very helpful. All right, let's go to my fellow Ohioan, Jackie.
And apparently your fellow Rockfordian at one point as well.
I saw that. We'll have to find out about that.
Yeah, this is just, you know, I think part of being a local site within a larger company, I hear a lot of complaints and I think confusion too about our relationship with the parent company. You know, people think someone in Tyson's is telling us what to write every day. And I mean, obviously that's not true. That's a pretty easy one to knock down. But when it comes to, you know, kind of the shrinking of our industry just in the last decade, and that's clearly happened outside of Gannett sites as well, but within them, I think I at least a couple times a month have readers write in and they're complaining about something else, but that's always part of the complaint is, you used to have all these people covering all these things and now you don't, and the paper shrunk, and I don't have news about this, I don't have news about that. And I try to point out that we're being more strategic with our much smaller staffing than we had in the past, and really focusing on stories with impact. And I usually have, because our staff is awesome, have some great examples to share with how we're doing that. But I think there is kind of this general sense of we're smaller, we're constantly laying people off. And to your point about Axios moving in, I mean, other nonprofits are seeing that as a weakness and a way for them to kind of reclaim some of that lost territory. So I would love to say, we're turning a corner and we're going to maybe start growing more, or adding back some of, our staffing and resources that were lost. But obviously it's very complicated.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and obviously something a lot of you are interested in. I'll tackle it from my perspective. Just know that I don't speak holistically for the company, but I can share my perspective and what I can. First, I will say transformations are hard. They're just a slog, and they're difficult. And we are in the middle of a transformation, and that's just tough. And I wish that there was a different response other than transformations are trying, and we're all in the middle of it. And I think the one upside to that is we're in a transformation that I think hopefully all of us are super passionate about and care about, and we are committed to the sustainability of local journalism long term. Does that mean that we have to go through some pain points while we go through what folks are willing to pay for, how folks are willing to consume content, and that different price point to get there? And so our goal is to be in our local communities long term, giving them the journalism and the content that they need to thrive. I don't need to tell this to you all, but we all know that our communities are healthier when they have a free press in it, when they have folks monitoring elections and school boards and all that. We're committed to that long term. It's a difficult journey through the transformation. And so I don't want to sugarcoat that. That being said, there are places in the organization where we are making investments, and it doesn't always feel like it, right? Because we've gone through years of integration and synergies and everything our industry has been through. But this year, when we came out with guidance for 2022, so when we released our Q4 earnings, we also gave a viewpoint of where we would be in 2022. And included in that was we're actually going to make less money in 2022 than we did in 2021. We'll have less EBITDA. And the reason for that, in part, is print is going to continue to decline. And when 70% of your base is declining and 30% is growing, it takes a little bit of time until that digital growth offsets the print losses, right? And so that's a headwind that we're fighting against. But we're pushing really hard for the areas that are growing to become a bigger part of our business. And that's going to change what it feels like and how we operate when we get to that point. The other thing we're doing is we're making intentional investments in different areas of our business. So we committed to $80 million of investments year over year. And I would say content started to make some of those investments last year. So you start to see like the cycling of it. You're still up year over year. So content, for example, is spending more dollars year over year in Q1 than they were last year. They still are in Q2 as well. And I don't know off the top of my head what the dynamics look like, but we're committed to spending more money in content this year than we did last year. And we're making those investments in content, in data, in marketing, and in digital only subscription acquisition marketing as well. And then also in our digital marketing solutions. So we are committed to making investments spending more year over year. And that's, again, in this year, about 80 million across all of those. It doesn't fix everything. It's still, we're still going through a business that from the top line is declining. We're still managing that. But we did make the commitment that, externally, we're going to have lower profit this year than we did last year. We think that that gets us to growth sooner. And so Gannett is investing in areas that will pay off for long-term growth. And, it's a balance. You invest dollars now and you see the growth 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 2 years down the line. And we're in that point where, we have to take a step back on profit to grow in the future, but we're there and we're making those investments.
Thank you.
And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right. I wanted to link it to a couple other things that are coming up in the chat, but carry on if you're still going.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the comments in there that's linked to this, and Mackenzie, stop me and pivot me as you want. One of the questions is going into shareholders' pockets instead. And I would say that two things. Right now, our priorities are debt pay down. So we've made significant progress on the debt that we took on as part of the acquisition of Gannett. We've paid down over $200 million worth of debt. We've refinanced it several times. It was very expensive debt. At the time of acquisition, we were paying something like 11.5% interest. Now we're paying 6% interest. But the faster we pay off that debt, the less overhang we think we have on our share price. We can talk a little bit about why that's important in a minute, but less cash out the door and interest and those type of things. So we have more future potential for investment the faster that we pay off debt. So that's the primary use of our cash. And then it's investing in our business. And so, that's where Invest More is going into paying down the debt that we have and into investing into our growth.
Well, and just a couple of follow-ups that I have, and then we'll go to Nicole. To the point of putting it in shareholders' pockets, all we have to do is look at the history of dividend payouts from Gannett and how the dividend has shrunk or been eliminated. And that's an easy one to answer from that standpoint. That's public data, that's public record. If I may also, and this is I'm asking Tricia for guidance on this little part of an answer that I would give to Jackie's question. So Gannett does not report store by store or site by site results. So I'm not asking Tricia to be in a position of saying this about a specific unit, but not all of our units make money. Some of them lose. And so, in Ohio, for example, I'm not going to give any details, but it's possible there in Ohio, where you're from, Jackie, that in the sort of collection of we've got big titles in Columbus and Cincinnati and other places, but we got some smaller titles that, wouldn't be in their communities, would not be serving the First Amendment responsibilities in their communities if they weren't part of a big publicly funded company. And so, good luck finding an investor to undertake journalism in, I won't name any names, but, being from Ohio, there's a lot of them, that at some point won't be big enough to be able to sustain a high profit margin business. So Gannett sustains news organizations and journalism in places that other companies wouldn't. And that's an investment in our communities. And so I don't know, Tricia, is that an answer we're at liberty to tinker around with, or would you stay away from it, or would you find fault with that? Do you find it to be untrue?
No, I agree. Now, I think it's interesting, right? It's so interesting. We absolutely we manage as a portfolio, right? And I think we manage our network as a network. And I would even say site P&Ls lack some refinement. Well over half of our costs are allocated from a centralized function. And so site P&Ls can absolutely be misleading, which is one of the reasons we don't report site-by-site statistics. But you're right. We're committed to not leaving news deserts. Some externally, there's optics of, concerns of, are you operating at losses across the organization? I think some people would think that's admirable, and some people would think that that's foolish, right? But we're committed to operating our network the most efficiently to make sure that we're serving our communities.
So that was a very well threaded needle there, Tricia. Thank you for that. All right, did you want to add?
Yeah, one more thing. I love the fact that you called out that we don't pay a dividend anymore. We stopped that. We have no intention to return that. And then just really quickly, I do want to touch not too much on our share price, but I do also want to say, to your point earlier, Mackenzie, about how we are where we are, how do we go forward from here? We are a public company. That's the reality. And we have public company responsibilities. And what I would say is that it's not our goal to return every dollar to our shareholder, but as a public company, we do have responsibility to our shareholders. And when our share price does well, it benefits all of us. It benefits our ability to invest in the company. It benefits the folks who are invested in us, which, as a reminder, are things like Fidelity and Vanguard, which is not, that's people's 401ks. That's my 401k. Those are the folks that are invested in us, but also, I know those of us who are with Legacy Gannett, I know what it's like when our share price is low and what that can invite. And that can invite interest from activist investors. It invites folks like Alden to take interest in you, right? So there is a responsibility of a public company to make sure that you're balancing your goal as a company and your responsibility to shareholders. So, that's not our only priority, but we are a public company. We do have responsibilities.
Very good. And neither readers nor employees were sold a bill of goods. They knew coming in, this is a public company, and publicly traded on the stock exchange, and that type of funding allows us to weather some of the storms that we have done. So, yeah. All right, let's go hear from Nicole. I promised Nicole in New England, and then because she has a follow-up to Jackie, and then after her, Rebecca in Colorado.
Actually, I think Tricia answered mine because that was the stockholder pockets. And I don't know, maybe that was from Legacy Gatehouse. Like that just was something that people would often cite. So you've addressed that. I would just say to Jackie's original question or comment about the public and what they have to complain about. Remember having a conversation with an editor-in-chief at the time where it was like, we're never going to be what they want, because what they want is like 4 million extra staffers, and we're just not going to be that thing anymore. So we have to try to figure out how to convince them that what we're trying to pivot to. But I don't know, for some people, I don't know if they'll ever be satisfied, because what they are holding on to is just not going to be. So I guess it's more about the spin or the, how good of a debater are you?
Yeah, and we have a significant audience, right? Whether it's digital or print, we have 2 million subscribers, print subscribers, 2 million digital subscribers, and from a digital audience perspective, 191 people who read our content, some piece of our content once a month, right? We don't need to make 191 million people happy. We're never going to make 191 million people happy. We'd like to make 6 million. Our goal is digital-only subscribers of 6 million by 2025. That means that we need to, be something that folks want to pay for to 5 to 6% of those people who visit our properties on a monthly basis. So, no company is ever going to make everybody happy. Walt Disney doesn't make everybody happy, right? And they're the happiest place on earth. We're not going to make everybody happy. We don't need to. It's finding who our audience is. It's finding the right content that audience will pay for. And you're absolutely right. Some people are going to love us. Some people are going to hate us. But not everybody has to love us for us to be successful.
And Tricia, just to put 191 million in perspective, 191 million people would be the 7th largest country in the world. So, bigger than Russia, Mexico, Japan, the Philippines. It's pretty big. It's a lot of folks. So, for those who feel the contraction, think about the enormity as well. Okay, Rebecca, in Colorado, what's your question?
Yeah, so going back to the digital subscriptions and that kind of being a, a factor that local newsrooms have some control over. Is there ever any talk about, making budgets proportional to, how a site is doing in terms of their digital subscriptions? And now that I asked the question, I guess I also realized, well, how would that be different from print subscriptions? How we did it based on print subscriptions. But I suppose I'm maybe asking more from almost like a carrot kind of perspective of, look, if you can really grow your digital subscriptions, then we can give you some more resources or we can give you a bigger budget. And why, what are some of the factors that go into why that's a bad idea or why that's a good idea?
Yeah. So what I will say is, we do leave some autonomy to the various functional leaders on how they manage their budget. They're the experts. And I wouldn't impose on Maribel, hey, here's how I think you should budget your organization. Definitely want to be collaborative, but everybody has their own perspective. What I would say to that is two things. First, I think the organization absolutely takes into account, where do we have the biggest addressable market or TAM, and how do we invest there, right? And so I think what you'll see is that we'll start to make investments in places where we think that can make the biggest payoff long term. So that's absolutely something that we keep top of mind as we're making investments. Where do we do it so that it has a great payoff? I also think part of our strength is that we are a network, right? And so the little story that comes out of the tiny little property in such and such a town, we're the only ones who have that. And so there's something to be said about the power of our network and the content across, we're not just on the coast, we're not just in middle America, we're everywhere. And so there's something to be said about the power of the network fuels our network subscriptions. But absolutely, as we look to invest in now and in the future, it's all about where can we get that, where is that growth going to come from? And let's put our dollars behind that. But I do truly believe, I'm afraid it sounds corny, but I believe it, that the network is what makes us powerful.
This is a stat that you all can use, and I can't remember, it was, I think News Leaders Association does a census or one of the organizations of where journalists are distributed in the country, and across the country, like 1 in 4 journalists are in 1 of 4 cities: New York, Washington, San Francisco, or Los Angeles. And wow. That number is 1 out of 27. So that speaks to 26 out of every 27 journalists in this company is in, not the coastal elite, right? And so that speaks to the power of the network that Tricia's talking about. For what it's worth, Tricia, when you talk about, you were struggling to put your finger on a specific tiny little town for your example. I always used to use Chillicothe, first because I'm an Ohioan, second because the Chillicothe Gazette is the oldest continuously operated business west of the Appalachian Mountains. But now that becomes difficult because we own not 1 but 2 Chillicothe properties, so that it doesn't play quite as well as it used to. All right, there's a couple questions here. It's hiring managers here, and we're all feeling the advantage that potential employees have right now. When we try to go hire them, they got a lot of choices, and wages are rising fast. That's part of what's either a trailing or a leading part of the inflation story, or both. And so, Michael, tell us kind of what your experience is, and is Ohio still okay? We will get back to that, Eric.
I'm not answering that question.
So I'm coming at you later. But Michael, go ahead and share your experience there.
Yeah, so a couple things we've noticed. One, in the last few years, anytime we have a job opening, whereas before 10, 15 years ago, most job openings would be people with 2, 3 years, 5 years experience would be applying. Now they're all fresh out of college, which isn't always a bad thing. You can get great workers who are fresh out of college, but certainly a lot of inexperienced people are applying for jobs here. And the second, particularly this year during reviews, more than half the staff, and I'm in Sioux Falls, we have a staff of 16. More than half the staff is asking for raises. So, everybody, as the example I used in the chat, everybody sees the now hiring signs as you're driving down the street. Pizza places are offering $18 an hour to cook pizza. Best Buy is offering 20, and for especially for some of the smaller sites here, including Sioux Falls, that puts us on par with what an entry level position is. I know that doesn't include benefits at those locations, but we're seeing a lot of competition, and a lot of our starting wages are a little out of whack. And so I think our employees are seeing that too, and rightfully asking for more. So what can we do to retain that experience? We want people to stay on staff long, because that 5-10 years experience in a newsroom is incredibly valuable. But when you're getting that pull salary wise from other competing jobs, how can we hire people at that rate, and how can we keep them?
Yeah, what I will say to that is a non-answer, in that I hear you, and I see it too, and I see it in our distribution. I'm sure you all know we see it in our distribution side of the business too, right? We're having a hard time hiring folks at entry level wages because they can't go get it somewhere else and not have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's tough. The fight for labor right now everywhere is incredibly tough. And I know that Sam Howland, hears this and is working on it. I know that Maribel hears it and is working on it. I wish I had an answer and said, oh, well, here you go. It's part of the reasons that we're committed to making investments. Does it solve it all? I'm sure it doesn't. But I know that that message was heard. It's part of the discussions. I wish I had an answer for it. I don't, other than I know, folks are wildly aware of the competition that we as an organization and you as newsrooms are facing out there.
All right, a few minutes left. Thank you for that that answer there. A few minutes left if there's another question or two. While folks are contemplating that, Tricia, this is going to seem like a little bit of a non sequitur, but it's very much like the folks that are making the decisions that the people on this call are on. One way they might think about putting themselves in an advantageous position is to try to move some of their fixed costs to variable costs. And could you tell us what that means and how they might pursue such a strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll use our partners and events as an example, right? So our events team, there's definitely some seasonality behind hosting events. And so Q1 is pretty light because both high school sports and Community's Choice are later in the year, but then also endurance races are just more fun when it's not snowing outside. And so there's definitely some seasonality to that. And so rather than having full-time events people on staff all year, we'll hire contractors in markets, we'll have vendors who do things. So it doesn't just have to be contractors, it can be vendors. But it's really making sure that, when we need a little extra support, whether it's vendors or contractors, during peak times, we can go out, we can grab that on a temporary basis, flex for those hot times, and then scale back to where we were without, flexing our employee base at that time. Or even, it's not just around headcount, it's also about, this is a bad example, but I'm just going to use it. AP, for example, right? We want to be cognizant that we're not locking ourselves. AP is a terrible example. Just pretend I didn't say that. But you want to make sure you're not locking yourself into 5-10 year contracts that are $10,000 a month, but maybe it's finding the balance of negotiating, I need four widgets and I'll pay you for 4 widgets rather than I'm going to pay you $100,000 and I'll get as many widgets as I need. Because I think we often overestimate how many widgets we need. So it's providing some flexibility in contracts to make sure that we're not locked in too long term or at too high of a dollar amount, and paying for what we need. And it's a balance, right, of not overpaying on an individual basis, but making sure that we don't have money that's going out the door that we're not using.
Yeah. I put in the chat, think a la carte versus buffet, right? You'd rather spend $10 for 3 things rather than 12 for 4 if you didn't use the 4th one. But if you did use the 4, that's a good bargain. So, okay. We're running up on time. This has been great. We've kind of wandered all over the place, and that's a little bit by plan. We wanted to make it so that you as local news leaders had, first some exposure to Tricia, and now you have an open line of communication to her. Second, to understand a little bit of the history and how our financial management and systems have changed over time. Third, how you can use those and take advantage of those and have those be tools at your disposal rather than be weaponized against you. Don't be a victim in the budget game. Be a shrewd operator, and we've heard a lot about that. And then there's this ventured into some more sort of investor relations territory or reader customer relations territory than I thought, and I'm glad that it did. Because at the end of the day, we're accountable to all of the things we are internally, but when the phone rings and it's a customer on the other end of the line, they don't care about your damn spreadsheet. They want their answer. And so being able to have a good explanation about why this or that is true, or why this used to be true and isn't, that was, to me, Tricia, one of the most valuable sections of today. So thanks for being nimble and doing that. Is there a last call for one final question? All right, then I'll say thank you, Tricia, to you. And is there anything you want to say to wrap up?
Yeah, first, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy this. I really get to enjoy a chance to spend time with you all. And also, I'm here, my team is here to support you. That's our role in the organization. What you do is on the forefront of what we do. We're here to make sure you all are successful. It's tough. I can't even imagine how tough it is to be not just leaders on the content side, but we are also asking you to be business leaders as well. And so to the extent that we can help, whether I can help, and please feel free to reach out to me anytime, or my team can help. Our role here is to make you all successful. So reach out anytime. It's been great to spend an hour with you, and happy to catch up on anything else that you need.
Thank you for the investment, Tricia. Take care. Bye-bye.
Right, have a great day. Nice to meet you all.
Bye, Mackenzie.